Have you ever noticed how some English learners sound so fluent, but others, even if they have a good vocabulary, they kind of struggle a little bit.
Yeah.
They hesitate or their sentences sound a little off.
Mm,
And it might be because they're still thinking in their native language and then translating everything in their head.
right.
So the real key to fluency is thinking directly in English.
Absolutely.
So today we're diving into some techniques that can help you make that leap
You're absolutely right.
from translating to actually thinking.
It's like learning to dance. You can memorize all the steps, but until you feel the rhythm and move instinctively, you won't truly flow on the dance floor.
I love that analogy.
So thinking in English is about finding that flow in your communication.
So how do we get to that point where English just flows naturally?
Well, one of the most effective techniques
What can our listeners actually try to make this happen?
involves creating what we call an English-speaking environment for yourself.
Okay.
Think about it. How did you learn your first language?
Yeah, you're surrounded by it constantly.
You are constantly surrounded by it.
As babies, we're bombarded with sounds, words, phrases, even before we understand what they mean.
Yeah, total immersion from day one. Exactly. And while you might not be able to recreate that level of immersion as an adult,
Right.
you can certainly create a mini version for yourself.
Okay.
Start by actively labeling everything around you in English.
Okay, so instead of just seeing a table, you think table.
Yes,
Instead of drinking coffee, it's I am drinking coffee.
precisely.
Okay.
It may seem basic,
Yeah.
but it's a powerful way to start shifting your brain into English mode.
Uh-huh.
And as you get comfortable with that, you can start describing your actions throughout the day.
Okay.
What are you doing? What are you feeling? What are you seeing?
Got it.
All in English.
All in English.
Right.
So labeling is step one.
Yeah.
What's another technique that can help rewire our brains for English?
This one might sound a little strange at first, but it's incredibly effective. Start using English for your internal monologue.
That little voice in our heads that's constantly narrating our lives.
Yes,
Start having it speak English.
exactly. It might feel awkward initially
Okay.
if you're putting on a voice,
Yeah.
but the more you do it, the more natural it will become.
So instead of thinking, I need to go grocery shopping later, you'd think, I need to go to the supermarket later today.
Oh, God.
Precisely.
Okay.
By practicing this internal monologue in English, you're essentially training your brain to process information in the language naturally without relying on translation.
Yeah.
Got it.
So we're starting to build this English-speaking environment in our minds.
Yes.
What else can we do to solidify that shift?
Here's where it gets a little more active. Don't be afraid to talk to yourself out loud in English.
I can already see our listeners raising their eyebrows.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, I've actually done this before.
Right.
And it really does help.
It's a fantastic way to practice pronunciation and get comfortable with the flow of spoken English.
Find a private space where you feel comfortable and just start chatting away.
Okay.
You can describe your day,
Yeah.
practice a presentation, or even just have a pretend conversation.
Imagine you're ordering food at a restaurant
Yeah.
or asking for directions. It's like giving yourself a mini immersion experience without even leaving your house.
It's all about creating opportunities to actively use the language rather than just passively absorbing it.
Yeah,
The more you speak, the more confident you'll become.
I like that. So far, we've talked about creating an English-speaking environment
Yes.
and practicing our internal monologue and even talking to ourselves out loud.
Mm-hmm.
But there's more to thinking in English than just individual words, right?
Absolutely.
Mm.
The real magic happens when we start thinking in phrases, not just words.
It's like learning to play the piano. You don't start by hitting random notes.
Right.
You learn chords and progressions. So
Mhm.
how do we apply that to English?
Think about how you express ideas in your native language. Do you always translate word for word? Or do you use common expressions and idioms that convey the meaning more naturally?
Right.
The same applies to English.
So instead of trying to mentally translate each word, we should focus on learning and using full expressions that native speakers use.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the more you expose yourself to authentic English content,
Okay.
movies, TV shows, books, the more you'll absorb these phrases naturally.
Speaking of authentic content, how important is immersion when it comes to shifting our thinking to English?
It's absolutely crucial. Think of your brain as a sponge.
Okay.
The more you soak it in English, the more it will absorb the language's structure, nuances, and rhythm.
So it's not just about understanding the meaning, it's about feeling the language, almost like developing an ear for it.
Exactly. And the beauty of immersion is that it doesn't have to feel like work.
Right.
You can watch your favorite shows, listen to podcasts, even play video games,
Yeah.
all while training your brain to think in English.
And with so much amazing content available these days, there's
Yeah.
really no excuse not to immerse ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just about passively consuming, right?
Right.
We need to actively engage with the language.
Absolutely. Don't just be a spectator. Try to anticipate what the characters might say next or repeat phrases that you find interesting.
You can even try shadowing speaking along with the actors or podcast hosts
Yes.
to mimic their intonation and rhythm.
Right.
It might feel silly at first,
Right.
but it's a powerful way to improve your pronunciation and fluency.
And don't be afraid to pause and rewind if you miss something. The goal is to actively process the language, not just let it wash over you.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of different techniques for thinking in English, creating an immersive environment, practicing our inner monologue, talking to ourselves and thinking in phrases. But let's be honest, shifting your entire thought process to a new language is a big challenge.
It's definitely a journey that requires effort, dedication, and yes, even a bit of frustration at times.
There are going to be days when you feel stuck, when you feel like you're not making any progress.
That's perfectly normal. Language learning isn't always linear.
Right.
There will be plateaus and setbacks, but that doesn't mean you should give up.
So how do we stay motivated when we hit those inevitable bumps in the road?
One of the most important things is to remember your why.
Okay.
Why are you learning English? What are your goals? What do you hope to achieve?
Is it to travel the world? Communicate with more people? Advance your career? Or simply enjoy a good book or movie in its original language?
Whatever your reasons, keep them at the forefront of your mind.
Okay.
Use them as fuel to push through those challenging moments because at the end of the day, the rewards of being able to think and communicate fluently in English are absolutely worth the effort.
Yeah, and remember, you don't have to do this alone. There are countless online communities, language exchange partners, and even apps designed to support you on your journey. Connecting with other learners can provide motivation, accountability, and a sense of camaraderie.
It's like having a cheering squad that understands the ups and downs of language learning. So reach out, connect, and support each other.
Exactly. Learning English is a marathon, not a sprint. And having a supportive community can make the journey so much more enjoyable and rewarding.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about a lot of practical techniques for training our brains to think in English. But there's one big obstacle that can really trip us up.
What's that?
The fear of making mistakes.
It's like this invisible barrier that keeps so many learners from truly embracing the language.
Yeah, we get so caught up in trying to be perfect to say everything exactly right that we end up hesitating, second-guessing ourselves,
Right.
and ultimately holding ourselves back.
It's a shame because making mistakes is actually one of the most valuable aspects of language learning.
Yeah, it's like learning to ride a bike.
Uh-huh.
You're going to fall a few times, but each fall teaches you something, helps you adjust your balance, and eventually you find your flow.
Exactly. Mistakes are not failures. They're feedback. They're opportunities to learn and grow.
So instead of seeing mistakes as something to be ashamed of, we need to embrace them as part of the process.
Think of them as stepping stones on your path to fluency.
And remember, even native speakers make mistakes. Nobody's perfect.
Absolutely. So don't let the fear of making a mistake keep you from speaking up, from expressing yourself, from taking risks with the language.
Yeah, the more you practice, the more comfortable you'll become,
Yeah.
and the less those mistakes will matter.
And if you do make a mistake, don't dwell on it. Just acknowledge it, correct it if you can, and move on.
Just keep going.
Keep going. Yeah.
Speaking of support, one of the best things you can do to boost your confidence and stay motivated is to surround yourself with a community of fellow learners.
It's amazing how much easier the journey becomes when you have people to share it with.
Imagine having a group of friends who understand exactly what you're going through, who celebrate your successes and offer encouragement when you're feeling discouraged.
It's like having a built-in support system that understands the unique challenges and rewards of language learning.
So find your tribe, whether it's an online forum, a local language exchange group, or even just a friend who's also learning English. Connect with others who are on the same path.
Share your experiences, practice together, and motivate each other. You'll be amazed at how much more enjoyable and effective the learning process becomes.
So we've covered a lot of ground today, from creating an English-speaking environment to embracing those inevitable mistakes. And I have to say, I'm feeling incredibly inspired.
Me too. It's exciting to think about all the doors that open when you can think and communicate fluently in English.
It's about more than just words. It's about connecting with people, exploring new cultures and expanding your horizons.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Imagine yourself a year from now, thinking effortlessly in English, expressing yourself with confidence and clarity.
What steps can you take today to make that vision a reality?
Remember, the journey starts with a single step, so choose one technique, one small action, and commit to it today.
That's it for this deep dive into thinking in English. We hope you enjoyed it. Keep practicing, keep experimenting, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself. You've got this.